So I've gotten to test a lot of cool cars this year, but there's only been one I've had this year that's gotten 3 out of every 5 suburban soccer moms to drop their jaw to the floor. And it's this, the 2023 Mercedes AMG G-Wagon with the $6,500 sea blue metallic paint option. The G-Wagon might not be everyone's favorite design, but you can't lie and say this isn't eye-catching. Now, despite this car being over 200 grand as optioned, it isn't as athletic as a Mercedes GLE or as fast as a Lamborghini Urus, but for whatever reason, everybody's girlfriend wants one of these. So today we're gonna figure out why. The G-Wagon is one of those rare cars that's been able to get away with charging an extremely high amount of money for the car without making any major changes to the general design since the very beginning, very similar to the Porsche 911. And I find that interesting because so many car manufacturers are trying to make their new car designs look as complex and as futuristic as humanly possible, sometimes to a fault. But the G-Wagon is the same brick on wheels that it was in the 80s, and I think some people find that refreshing. In case you're unaware, the G-Wagon was actually developed with the intention of being a military transport vehicle with off-road capabilities, and without the pretty blue paint and AMG wheels, you can certainly see how that's possible. The car just has this very militaristic and rugged look to it. Most people describe this as the fancier version of the Jeep Wrangler, and I think that's a pretty accurate way to describe it. I personally prefer a more sporty look to my SUVs, a Porsche Cayenne or a Mercedes GLE type beat, but I can definitely appreciate the fact that the G-Wagon has its own vibe. Kinda. As to why I think so many ladies like this design though, well, I think it's a combination of a few different things. When you see rich people with these online, they tend to be in super interesting wraps and paint jobs, pinks and blues and bright reds. It's not always super tasteful, but it's usually pretty attention grabbing. Also, I think there's something about this rugged and bulky design that makes the car feel safe. If you were to get in an accident with one of these things, I think it's very likely that the other car would receive the worst end of the damage. But at the same time, the car doesn't come off very aggressively with these circular headlights. And another thing is that obviously the G-Wagon is a status symbol vehicle. So even if your girlfriend couldn't tell you the name of any other Mercedes model, she might know the G-Wagon simply because of popular influencers, musicians, etc. But while we're still on the design, let's talk about a few other big money options that we've got on the car. Firstly, we've got these 22-inch AMG Forge matte black wheels. That's $4,400 essentially. Then we've got the AMG Night package that blacks out all of the exterior trim. That's another $2 grand, but the most expensive option on the car that costs more than both of those options combined is actually for the interior. So let's take a look. Inside this G-Wagon is an $8,200 interior package, and for that money you're getting exclusive Nappa leather, diamond quilt stitching, heated and ventilated seats, AMG badging on the front seats, and this little label on the grab handle here. And it sure does look nice in here, but is it really worth $8 grand? I'm kind of in the middle on that. Also, I think you have to be very bold to get this white leather for the seats. I'd be absolutely terrified of spilling anything in here. But don't get it twisted, this is a very premium experience overall. There isn't a single control or switch that feels cheap in any capacity. Overall, it feels like you're driving a very expensive car. It's not Rolls-Royce premium, but it's definitely up there as far as a luxury vehicle is concerned. A signature Mercedes feature that a lot of people find appealing is the multicolor LED lighting that goes throughout the entire interior, and you can go into the infotainment to customize it to be pretty much any color you'd like, or select between an assortment of different color combinations. And especially at night, it's a vibe, as the cool kids like to say. I think the interior experience is where Mercedes has always had other brands like Audi, Porsche, and BMW beat, because it always feels special to be in one of these cars, and the G-Wagon is a perfect example of that. One thing that I find absolutely ridiculous about the interior experience is that you don't have wireless Android Auto or Apple CarPlay, and this is really starting to become a trigger for me when it comes to cars. I'm starting to experience all these brand new cars over the $60,000+ price point that require you to use a wire to experience CarPlay or Android Auto, and it makes absolutely no sense, especially when there's relatively cheap dongles that you can buy to make wired CarPlay wireless. So it's not a technological limitation issue, which makes me even more confused as to why this is a thing. But yeah, this is definitely my least favorite aspect of the interior experience of this car. When you're spending nearly $250,000, I think it's fair that you get wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but Unfortunately not here. But outside of that, I don't have any real complaints about the interior experience. The Burmeister sound system in here isn't really as impressive as it's been for me in other Mercedes cars like their EVs. I feel like it's just a bit too bass heavy with there not being enough sharpness and clarity in the mids and high ranges. Now granted, this is the stock system, so you're not paying extra for it, but there also isn't a more expensive option that you can get to get better sound quality, so you're kind of just stuck with this sound system no matter what. And it's not a bad sound system by any means, it just isn't that impressive for how much this car costs, but I think the casual listener should be pretty satisfied with it. This isn't just the Mercedes G-Wagon, this is the AMG G-Wagon, which means we've got the twin-turbo V8 that's found in the other AMG cars with the 63 nomenclature. That also means we've got AMG-tuned transmission, suspension, brakes, and of course the AMG performance exhaust. And I must admit, despite this car being a big, heavy brick, it makes the 570 horsepower and 630 pound-feet of torque feel like a lot more, quite honestly. And I think that's all due to those turbos. When you're in the right rev range, this thing just absolutely rips. And I think this car kind of has a Hummer EV sort of effect where it's not necessarily how fast it is that's impressive, but how it's able to move this much weight at such a rapid pace. This car can do 0 to 60 in under 4 seconds, which is not slow by any means. And like I said, I think that's pretty impressive for a car that's weighing nearly 6,000 pounds. It's nothing to scoff at. But outside of purely speed, this car drives so much better than the previous generation G-Wagon that I got to drive briefly a little while back, and I didn't really like it that much, but this car feels so much better. The turn-in is a lot more confident. You don't have a crazy amount of body roll, and despite you sitting up relatively high in the car, it doesn't feel like you're driving a mini school bus like you did in the last version. I let my girlfriend drive this car a few times, and she's definitely a fan of the fact that you're sitting up pretty high on the road like an SUV does, but she's also a fan, and myself, of the adaptive bolstering feature. And it's a feature that pushes the bolsters out in the seat to keep you in place when doing turns in the car. So if you're turning right, the left bolsters are gonna stick out to keep you in place when doing a turn, and vice versa. If you turn left like I'm doing now, the right bolster sticks out to keep me in place when doing any sort of turns. And that's a pretty cool feature, especially for a big, heavy car like this, being able to keep you snug and in place. I think that adds to the sporty driving experience, but also makes you feel a little bit more safe when doing turns. Also, something that surprised me is that I've had this car since Tuesday. It's Saturday right now, and I've just now gotten to a quarter tank. And for a twin turbo V8 pushing a 6,000 pound car, I'd say that's pretty solid as far as fuel economy. And I've been ripping this thing a lot, trust me, and I'm just now getting to a quarter tank. That's pretty impressive. Overall, this car is very nice to drive. It's very comfortable, even in the stiffest suspension setting like we have it in right now. It handles uneven roads and bumps very, very well. And despite this being an AMG car, it's not insanely loud. I'd say it's definitely manageable. So this car is satisfying enough for an enthusiast like me who wants to have fun sometimes, but also not too hardcore for someone like my girlfriend who sometimes just wants to get from point A to point B. Very much a dual personality vehicle to an extent. I was gonna film the outro outside like normal, but it's raining right now, so I can't really do that. But overall, this G-Wagon is one of the most unique luxury cars you can buy. Sure, for 200 grand, you get something a lot more grandiose like a Rolls Royce or a Maybach, but you know, it's comfortable, it feels like a freaking tank. Like, listen to these doors close. That's pretty hefty. This door has to weigh like 800 pounds or something like that. And it's honestly really attention grabbing, especially in a color like this. This car is probably right next to the C8 as far as the most attention grabbing cars I've driven in recent memory. Although I feel like if you don't really care about performance that much, you could get the non-AMG version and save tens of thousands of dollars and more or less get the same experience. But trust me, this G63 version is fast and a lot faster than I expected. So if you got the bread, then just go right ahead and get the G63 version instead. Just make sure you get it in blue and not red. All right, and this rap session is dead. Okay, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to future content like this. I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Okay. No more cigar smoking voice. I don't smoke cigars though.